Good afternoon. I'm Ron Pinniger, National Security Subject Matter Expert for the Watson and IBM Cognitive Solutions team, and I'm a 17-year IBMer. I'm also a U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm personally invested in helping our men and women in uniform bring the very best to the battlefields that they walk. The dawn of the computer age has promised acceleration, accuracy, and less work for the human. Do you guys believe that? Maybe, maybe not. While industry and government have seen incredible leaps in computing power, processing abilities, and the volume of work that can be accomplished in a day, we've really not seen the advances in intelligent decision-making promised by the computer age until now. Computing advances have in fact made our world more complex and bewildering than ever before. This is because the computing and sensing power of our machines create vast new data sets and information points each day. No human, no matter how well trained or educated, can make sense of, much less even see, the data produced each day in even just one constrained industry. Well, I'll tell a little story here, because I know you guys love hearing about big data and bits and bytes, right? My father was a U.S. Marine in Vietnam, and he told me many stories about the war, but one that stuck with me was about his pre-flight ritual while he was stationed in Da Nang Air Base and flying missions all over the AO. And this is actually clippings from an article in Leatherneck magazine from 1965. And this is his squadron. He deployed H-34s and then later with H-53s, the first H-53s to deploy to Vietnam in combat. His pre-flight ritual was this. He was an aircraft mechanic and a crew chief. So those guys man the machine gun, they keep the aircraft flying as best they can while they're in it, and then they maintain it on the ground. Even though it wasn't his job, his pre-flight ritual was to go down to the S2 tent or the S2 hut. S2 for non-Marines is the intel section, and he would go and look at the big board, the map of South Vietnam, with an acetate sheet over it, which is a clear piece of plastic, where the intel guys would plot the movements of the adversary, our own forces, little bits of intel, and he would read that thing religiously before he got in his aircraft and went out. My dad told me that, and it stuck with me. It stuck with me until I had to go do it for myself. And Uncle Sam invited me to have a couple free tours of the garden spots of the world. So I've been to wonderful places like Anbar, Iraq, and all over the country of Afghanistan and a few other places. So I took my dad's words to heart because he gave me a lecture before I packed my stuff and left and said, "You know what you need to know before you go, right?" I said, "Yes, Dad, I got you." So I would do the same thing. I'd go and read every scrap of data before I went on patrol. And I was in the intel section, so I had access to a lot. It still wasn't enough, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Even with this prep and being in the intelligence section, we had limited access to updates while on patrol. A key problem I observed was there was no way to obtain photos or other useful details of threats or high-value individuals while on patrol. But I have a hypothesis here, and just like a good Watson person, we come up with a scientific problem, we go test it, and we try to prove it. So my hypothesis is that we can drive cognitive machines to the tactical edge, and I'll throw out some ideas for you today, and please question me on it if you don't agree with me. I'd love to work it out with you here today. But I think we can move cognitive machines to the tactical edge and give advantage to our troops on the battlefield today. There's a lot of challenges on the battlefield. I'm not going to read these in depth to you because many of you have been in uniform, many of you support the Department of Defense, but we have so much data, it's complex, it's bewildering. We have so much, we don't know what to do with it. Even in the intelligence section with incredible database computing power, with amazing network analysis tools, many of them are automated. We still can't make sense of what we're seeing. Plus, if you're that grunt dragging a M60 or a SAW or a 240 Bravo through the dust, or that air crew, you're not concerned about who's who in the Al-Qaeda zoo. You're concerned about going through that mission, getting it done, and coming home in one piece. That's all you care about in those 2, 3 to 10 hours. If anyone in IBM or any other company says Watson or we can eliminate the fog of war, please give me a call. I'm going to go visit them at their house, because it can't be done. The fog of war has been with us from ancient times, and it will continue to be with us when my grandsons are fighting and serving in the military. The only path for success in consuming and making decisions on this massive new data sets that we're seeing proliferate everywhere is to have a machine start to read all of that stuff and only report to us the stuff that we need for the mission we're on at the moment. Again, I'll ask you, what rifleman wants to have a constant feed of data coming to his cell phone while he's on patrol? There's not one. But there is a rifleman that would like to have the bolo of the guy who's out there opposing him while he's on patrol. Now, when I was on that patrol here, this was in the lovely town of Haditha, Iraq. I'm a Navy guy, but this is where the Marines in 2006 had one of their bloodiest battles in the war. And they took this city at great expense, blood and treasure on our side. It was one of the hotbeds of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and one of the birthplaces of what became the Islamic State. We, on this particular patrol, we were told on the radio, we were using these great embitters from the Thales company in France, and hey, be on the lookout for a white bongo truck with a suicide bomber in it. Do you know how many white bongo trucks there are in Iraq? Like every truck is a white bongo truck. That was our intel dump while on patrol. We couldn't get a photo of the guy, couldn't get a photo of the truck, and didn't have any more data. Now, you got to give our men and women a lot of credit, and there are women fighting, by the way, on these patrols. They don't light up every white bongo truck that drives by just because they got a bolo on it. Be on the lookout, right? They have great restraint, and they execute well. And we did here, too. So I'm very proud of those guys and gals. But it's that wrong data at the wrong time, at the wrong place, right? To the wrong individual. We could fix that, and I'll show you some ways how we can do that. For the tactical leader, cognitive machines are ideal at parsing the millions of daily data points and clues to adversary actions that arise each day, especially at war. Seeing through the fog of too much data is a key strength of machine learning. Only a machine can read the millions of small and large data sets coming into the battle space. Cognitive machines will not only alert U.S. battle staffs and small unit leaders to adversary actions, but they will also nominate to the rifle squad leader or air wing commander where opportunities to take the initiative on the battlefield lie. The advantages of cognitive machines are that this soldier that you're adding to your cadre never tires, and it can read the equivalent of the Harvard, the Yale, the Georgetown library in 12 seconds, and can read everything in the library in 12 seconds and come back with an answer. And because we'll talk a minute how we're going to filter this for guys and gals in the field, it can present information at the right time and place to the person who needs it, rather than have that person conduct yet another search task. We know we can do this because IBM is doing this right now in the US federal government. Machines will also identify non-obvious relationships inside and adjacent to our knowledge. We know this can be done because we're doing it right now. So IBM's point of view, I know you've heard a little bit about this today, but one of the most salient descriptions of what is IBM's view of cognitive computing and what it's not. I know we've thrown the word AI around a lot today. Most IBMers in this world do not consider what we do artificial intelligence. We consider it augmented intelligence. And it's not intelligence with the S2 or the N2 in front of it, but we're augmenting with the machine the natural intelligence of our troops. And we're going to let the machines do all the boring, mundane things of reading reports and drawing connections, and then we're going to present it to the human, and the human will make the decisions. Now let's look at how we conduct. I think I went a little too far here. How we conduct missions today. So like my dad back in Vietnam, you'd go to the S2 tent today if you're preparing for a mounted patrol, especially a mounted patrol. S2, tell me where all the IEDs are along Route Bronze for the last 30 days. This is a typical question or query that almost every tactical unit does nowadays when they're going out on the ground. Foot patrol or mounted patrol. Once they know that, they start asking, this kicks off probably 30 or 40 other questions, right? What were the IED types? Who were the people identified that emplaced them? What time of day were they emplaced, if we know that? What time of day were they hit? And so forth, right? And because when the rifleman plans his mission, he's trying to put a picture in his mind and then translate it to the team. Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's our reaction to it, and they plan their courses of action. My boss, Julianne Galina, gave you a great synopsis of what we believe can be done right now in developing courses of action for our troops. This is what the rifleman or the sailor or the soldier faces every day. They need the right data at the right time, and they don't need a lot of data. They just need the right stuff. Now, in the art of the possible, and when I say possible, I'm talking about art of what's possible this year or next year, not 5 years from now. We all carry in our pockets a mini supercomputer. They're pretty awesome at collecting data. They're pretty awesome at parsing it and then presenting it to us. We already have these fantastic sensors and communications in the field right now. What is lacking is the ability to tie these together rapidly. I'll focus on smartphones. Most convoys have one or more in each vehicle, sometimes even when they are forbidden. They are ubiquitous, relatively cheap sensors, comms, and knowledge managers, and they're in our pockets. Simply adding a chemical sensor, camera filters, medical sensors, and possibly other COTS add-ons, we can turn this small device into a battlefield sensor of next year. And then Watson Technologies or other cognitive tools from us and other vendors can collect and sew those together and present data to the tactical unit in near real time. For instance, I'm going to tell you another interesting Navy story. You guys may know that you probably say, how is this guy a sailor and he's running around the dusty streets of Haditha, Iraq? Well, I'm only one of over 100,000 plus sailors who have been in the combat zone in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's everything from Seabees to SEALs to aviators, intelligence personnel, civil affairs, you name it. The Navy's there. Sometimes we're in camouflage because we're wearing an Army uniform, so you can't tell us apart until you see U.S. Navy or the chief's anchor. But just to show you how we don't get the data we need, as if I need to tell you that, right? One of my very good friends who's working with the DoD right now was assigned to a very elite unit in Fallujah. And he wore a big scruffy beard that looked like a Taliban and was very dusty and dirty all the time, and he carried a bunch of guns and grenades. And they'd go out on patrol looking for bad guys. Didn't find any bad guys. Come back to base, and on all our bases we have these incredible shops run by patriots called the Green Bean. You guys know the Green Bean? It's the equivalent of Starbucks in the field. And so he's in Green Bean getting some chai one morning, and he's minding his own business, talking to his buddies, and looks over and sees a guy sweeping up and says, that guy looks kind of familiar. And he takes a double take and says, he looks really familiar. As a matter of fact, I think he's on the wall of our TOC. Lo and behold, my good friend, who I won't name, but there's actually been 2 books and a movie written about this, Pulled out his 6-hour 9, put it to the guy's temple, and grabbed him by the neck and said, "Are you Abu Nidal?" "Yes, come with me." He arrested in the green bean on the US base, working inside our wire, the number 3 HVI for Al-Qaeda in Iraq that year. It was about 2006, 2007. The guy was working inside our base. Obviously, he was casing us in preparation for a major attack. Now, I ask you, wouldn't it have been nice if, so my friend, his brain was trained on the high-value individual, or HVI list, for the CENTCOM AOR, because he lived it every day. He was an intel guy. Wouldn't it be great if his smartphone or his body cam or even the GBOSS system that sits above every base videotaping our bases and out, what if it had been trained on the HVI list? What if every command post or ECP, entry control point, had a little teeny camera that was trained to recognize the bad guys before they got into our base? We're doing this now in IBM, and I think I can speak to it now publicly. We have a system we've just launched called the True North cognitive computer. It's an incredibly powerful chip. It's only about this big, and the whole computer, which is an incredibly fast computer, is about this big. We've already connected high-resolution camera to it through a USB connector, and we can actually train this device to look for not just the photo of the high-value individuals, but the traits, the gait, meaning the walk of the individual, including, so a guy laden with a heavy suicide vest is going to walk a lot differently than you or I in a normal suit. He or she is also probably going to be a lot hotter in their heat signature than even one of us in uniform in the Middle East. And an IR camera costs 50 cents, or an IR lens costs 50 cents to put on this thing. So we're already training machines to look for very specific behaviors. We just need to deploy them to the battlefield. The other thing about what I was talking about earlier, how do we drive the right data to the right people in the field right when they need it and not inundate them with lots of tweets and bits and bytes that they don't care about? Well, if you look up there on the far right on your side, that's a Thales MBITR or MBITR-like field communication device right now. It's a walkie-talkie. That's what I call it. I grew up in the Vietnam era, and my G.I. Joe had a walkie-talkie. And that MBITR sends a GPS coordinate wherever it is in the world, and it's already encrypted. So we know where that user is on our secure net, and if I know where he is, I can then vector just the bits of data that person needs while he's in the field when he needs it. For instance, getting that be on the lookout over the radio with very little data, that's great. When I got back to the talk, they had a photo of the white bongo truck, but I can't get that when I'm in the field. Now we can, because those radios can transmit data. The Watson visual recognition, our technology that we can use, that's the black box there is a biometrics enrollment device. We can train that device not only to recognize the fingerprints and photos of the people that we're looking for. It already does that, by the way. But what if the device also kicked off, hey, we don't have HVI number 3, but we have his cousin who's trying to get a job on base. What's the very next question or task that I would do as a local tactical leader, and I had that knowledge? Anyone? Talk to the cousin? Abduct? We don't do that in the United States. We detain per all legal parameters. No, you're right. Absolutely. I would stop that guy at the gate, and I'd say, please, sir, come visit me in my little hut that's got lots of bars and locks on it, and we're going to drink chai for the next 25 hours. So Exactly, and I've done that. So yeah, that's exactly what. By the way, the Dagger Biometrics enrollment device does not have that capability right now. It can. By adding medical plugins to existing smartphones and smart devices, we can do everything from biometrics, health informatics, and things like that, and we can parse it in all these technologies we already have invented, and they're already publicly available on the market today. So how would this stuff be used in reality right now at the tactical edge? How am I doing on time, by the way? Good to go? 5? Oh, plenty of time. Right now, the way we're using a lot of the cognitive stuff is you have smart intelligence analysts, smart operators. They query systems, right? How many times a day do you query Google or Bing or some other tool and ask it questions and it comes back to you? That's a valid way to do it. And it's a slow way to do it because most of our tooling is geared towards the very smart national security analyst or intelligence analyst or even operations research analyst. So those are guys and gals who have time to think about a hard problem, to parse it into 14,000 questions. And by the way, we're working on cognitive machines that ask 14,000 questions and do it automatically with no human involvement. We're almost there. But what about the guy or the gal who has to step out of the Humvee and take their medical bag or their civil affairs notebook down and go work in the Afghan village? Those guys got to plan a route. They've got to execute it. They've got to do a lot of stuff while they're there. And then they've got to do a whole host. This is what the small unit leadership of every ground unit, naval unit, and air unit has to do. So right now, we can envision, and we are envisioning it right now, and I'll show you in a minute how we're going to do it. Instead of having that small unit leader ask 14,000 questions, we're going to build a ground small unit leader cognitive app. And the gentleman is, we have female rangers now, and they're doing incredible things. Very proud of them. They're going to plan their mission, file it in a system like a Watson or something else. And then the system is going to go, be advised, over the last 30 days at control point C, D, and F, there were 5 IEDs over this, and they were detonated at these times. These are critical things that the team wants to know. Here's all the small arms fire attacks. Here's cultural areas of concern. We are Americans. We do not go out and blow up people's religious sites. We care for them as best we can. It's going to prompt all that and do it for the small unit leader. So the unit leader is focused on getting his mission accomplished, getting back safely with his troops, which is what he cares about. And that's a beautiful thing. And I want to build this. So if you don't believe me, let's see what General Mattis has to say. I love him. I'm so glad to work for him. I'm not going to read the first paragraph because probably many of you have heard of the 3-block war, but the next paragraph is very important. We are extending the concept a bit and beginning to talk about adding a new dimension. We're adding a 4th block, which makes it the 4-block war. The additional block deals with the psychological or information operations aspects. And this is where cognitive machines can really have a great impact. Once you subdue enemy fire and eliminate the threat, and you help the civilian populace who's been injured, and you feed them, and you give them clean water, and you've done those things, you still have to win the coin or the counterinsurgency war, we have to build the coalition with the local populace. We have to, or we won't win in a counterinsurgency environment. The Brits learned this in Malaysia, we learned it in Vietnam, and we don't want to relearn it. And so the provisioning of the intelligence and even tasking by aided by machines, is where we're going to dominate in the fourth block of this war. So I want to end with, let us never forget who our real customers are. They are the police, soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines who we ask to walk the dusty streets of war zones all over the place. They're the petty officers, sergeants, and airmen from every town and county, and they are your neighbors, sisters, and sons. And my dad, I'm so thankful he taught me these things before I had to go, and I hope I can now give those future Marines and sailors the very best intelligence and prep for their mission before they go out the door. And that's the reason I'm here today. That's all I have for you today. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you. Yes, sir. Hope I can answer them.
Those 4 devices you showed, they contain everything of those, the Watson conversation. That's the only device you need to use Watson conversation. The next device, Watson Explorer, that's the only device you need, or doesn't have to be connected to the larger, whatever, Watson?
In certain cases, yes. So in another session, and I want to sell you to go somewhere else. I want you to stay here and buy lots of stuff. No, I'm joking. One of my coworkers, Joe Kuba, is actually demonstrating a conversation bot for veterans as we speak to combat PTSD. So it's a chat bot that interacts with a veteran who may be in crisis, and it runs on the cell phone, and it's already been developed. So he's demoing that now. Watson Explorer is one of our technologies that mashes up in one data set or one database, structured, semi-structured, and completely unstructured data. So I can take tabular data or structured data from like medical devices, and I can mash it up with medical records, and I can do it on a laptop. And I can push little bits to devices, yes. The Dagger Biometrics Enrollment Kit is currently in use by DoD, has no Watson on it at the moment. But we want to. We want to train that device to not just recognize a person who's on the list or not, but to give a little bit of tippers, right? All we need to do is, all I want on that one is to say, hey, adjacent to this individual are other individuals or networks that you should ask about. And right now, that's done in the brain of smart operators and analysts. And lastly, we do have Watson speech to text already and text to speech. So you can talk in regular language, and it'll translate it into text to a machine, and it can go backwards, which is what we demonstrated successfully on Jeopardy. Yes, sir.
In other sessions, I've seen a long list of components of Watson.
Yep.
I guess my question basically is, not all those components are on these devices.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So no, these are highly specialized. They are not going to contain all the components of what we hear about Watson on this in all these sessions here.
You're exactly right, sir. And there's a rationale for that. So we have built a few incredibly large Watson systems right now. Many of them are deployed to the medical business. That's great. They're large. I mean, they take up data centers, right? But what we're learning is that, just like my analogy with the soldiers in the field, an operator, whether they're a nurse, a soldier, a sales guy, a mechanic, they really, when they're doing their tasks, they need to be educated or helped on that task. They don't need the whole encyclopedia or the whole library. So that's what we're doing. And if you want to try it tonight, you can go to ibm.com/bluemix, and you can try out probably 30 different APIs tonight. There's no cost. You just play with them. I think we have a question in the back. Thank you,
There's
sir.
one there too.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.
Quick question. The products you have here, are these straight commercial products open for sale anywhere?
Yes. and these are all currently available to you. Matter of fact, the conversation, recognition, and speech and others are available right now at Blue Mix. You can go play with them tonight. There's no cost.
I guess my question always, I'm former Intel, is so it means my adversaries can purchase this also?
They can, yes. Yes.
Just curious.
Watson Explorer is available. It's a generally available product, and you can install that on everything from a laptop up to a supercomputer. Yep. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Wait for it.
Just maybe digging down just a little bit on the visual recognition. You mentioned that it's got the biometrics and that the additional capability is available or soon to be available. Mm-hmm. In the bandwidth constrained environments that you're dealing with, what additional kind of bandwidth is necessary to support the additional capability you're talking about bringing?
Yes, sir. In the case of this particular device, this is a device being used by the Army, Navy, and Marines and law enforcement right now to enroll all types of folks that are working with us or we're encountering. So that means when a soldier's at an entry control point to a base and people want to come aboard and we don't know who they are, they actually, just behind the little flip-up flap, there's a stereoscopic high-res camera that can take a facial photo and take pictures of the irises of people. And then the database is resident on the machine. So it then says it matches multiple biometrics. And this is not a Watson product, by the way. I just want to be clear about that, or an IBM product. And then it decides whether this person is on a watch list or not. It also enrolls them. So now we have a little bit of data. So we enroll every single person that comes aboard the base in a foreign land. So the folks working in the chow hall, the people building on base, interpreters, all those folks are enrolled in this system. And the Army and now DoD writ large runs a very large program called the Defense Biometrics something agency, and I can't remember the name at the moment. It's a fairly new agency. And we're trying to get all this together. So what I'm saying is we could add another dimension to that device and tip the screeners at the tactical edge to go question these individuals just with a tip. We don't have to have a lot of data. Just go question this person about his cousin or his brother or this incident that occurred. There's some kind of relationship. And because we're doing that now back here in the States, but it's on much larger machines. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm retired Air Force, by the way. Yeah, anyway.
Outstanding.
Sorry.
Thank you for your C-5 ferry to Iraq. We appreciate it.
Anyway, I just wanted to ask you, though, I was intrigued by the question in the back, which actually also occurred to me about, anybody can go on and download these, but I assume the applications you're using with the U.S. military have been made secure.
The answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would think
I'm
that we have
relieved.
the advantage over other countries still at this stage. But,
And plus the allies and so
Yeah.
on. Thank you.
yeah, my pleasure. Yes, sir.
All those early pictures of your dad and Penang and Pier 34 ring a bell. Been there, done that.
Yes, sir.
One of the frustrations when we would go up to see patrol reports on a given morning was that a useful piece of intel from last night's patrols would be reported by a corporal, whomever, and I always wished that there were a way to share that beyond his CP.
Yeah.
And I assume that at some level, however, you'd want to filter out and still disseminate quickly something important. Is that, I'm sure, built into the system already? But at what level, right now, company level, battalion level, and so forth? I assume you've thought a lot about that and designing the algorithm that's going to take morning reports and update the intel.
Yes, sir. It's a great question. It is probably one of the most important questions about the future of Watson in the DoD. So we've built a few incredibly large cognitive systems surrounding national intelligence. You've hit the nail on the head. What we found in one of our most recent pilots is that what we lack in the intel community is that real-world corporals and sergeants and tech sergeants and first lieutenants reporting what happened last night. We have been requested by a major combat command to start ingesting that kind of data, so operational data. And my team, some of them are in the room here, it's what the next step of this is going to be. Yes, sir. What's so interesting about that statement is a lot of these tools, because many of us come from the intel side, we always think intel analyst and intel operator, right? The most fascinating thing about the last 3 months in Watson Federal or in IBM Federal is that we're talking less to the J2 side, and we're talking a whole lot more to the J3 side. And that's where we need to go. Because after all, they're the ones that go fight the war. And they're the ones that, they're the ones that matter. So I'm really encouraged by it. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm an ORSA and Army analyst. Did the downrange thing, and
Yep.
with that next step and being able to link in Watson with the what's going on the ground and ingesting all of that, what kind of time frame do you see? Because I remember when we were downrange, I was the S2, and
Yep.
so I did that morning report, pulled all the reports that I said, and did a geofence filter that I had to build myself.
That's right.
And now the system could do it for me. What sort of granularity do you see, and what sort of time horizon do you see that being able to you get available to somebody in the field?
Yeah. This is really encouraging. If you want to talk about specifics, please see me or Jimmy Norcross after this, or Amish Patel. We'd be glad to talk to you. We can invite you to a classified briefing and describe in detail. Let me put it this way. We have built some systems right now that overnight at 2 o'clock Eastern time, around about then, we can ingest 30,000 new documents in a matter of a few minutes to a half hour. Updating our library every single night with whatever is coming in. And as Mr. McFarland said, we need to get operational data in there as well. And that's our next step. So yes, we can do that. We are doing it. Any other questions? Sure. One more back there.
Just a question. I've been kind of out of the domain with this. These tools, are they geared toward company below, platoon and below when they're out? In that case, I'm just curious. When I was working on some projects with this, the issue we had is we were building some things, or we're doing some work with some projects at platoon level. Mm-hmm. But the challenge we had is the communications infrastructure did not come out to the company platoon.
Yep.
Has that improved so these tools can now have a way to communicate when they're out away from the fob?
It's one of the major challenges. It's not I don't want to sound like I'm skipping out on the question, but it's not a Watson question. The JWICS network goes out to a certain echelon, and it doesn't go below that for both clearances and bandwidth. Our next foray, we hope, and we've not received funding for this yet, but is to move these tools down to SIPRNet, which could reach most of the Department of Defense troops. Some of these tools, Watson Conversation and these others, can be deployed right now to a smartphone. We just need policy and approvals to do so. The challenge with doing things on totally unclassed networks is that, God forbid, the enemy or an adversary were to hack They even if it's seemingly mundane data, they could possibly get things like geolocations, and which would be terrible for us. So we have to work within the existing programs to protect it. That's why I don't know that we'll be giving every soldier with an Android phone a Watson app, but maybe so down the road a little bit. Yeah. Here's it. Yes, sir. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time. Great questions.